Okay, so today I'd like to talk to you about how to employ APA-style guidelines to writing papers. Before I begin, I wanted to point you towards a relevant website that I often refer to when I'm unsure about things and rules. And this is the apastyle.apa.org website, which is entirely free. And it has a lot of different links and rules that you can look up here. And it also has guides that kind of outline, for example, the statistical rules, the numbers, and even some of the relevant issues for tables and figures, etc. Another thing that you could use to refer to rules is the book that has been also published by the same people, although it's not necessarily necessary because most of the rules are available here. And another thing that you can use to actually refer to is published papers that have been published in APA-style journals, such as Psych Science. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to talk about is the rules of headers. There's 5 different styles of headers that you can use, and the first one is kind of a level 1 header, and it's going to be placed in the middle. It's going to be bolded, and also it uses capitalization this in the same way as all of the other headers do. So for example, this level 1 heading here capitalizes words, and you'll notice that the words that are capitalized are all important words, including nouns and verbs, but also words that are longer or equal to 4 letters. So after or first or main are also capitalized. Smaller minor words such as the and for will not be capitalized. Okay. Then the level 2 header is going to be bolded and to the left. The next header, level 3, let's go to the next page, is going to be italicized and to the left. And then the next one, level 4 header, is going to be indented and bolded and no longer italicized. And then if you want to have a level 5 header, you'll have to italicize it again. Note for the level 4 and level 5 header, there's going to be a period after, whereas in the other headers, there's not a period. Okay, so these were the header rules. Now I'm going to go talk to you about some of the other rules that are relevant as well. And I've taken a paper draft of my own, and I've obviously modified it a little bit to demonstrate to you the different things that you might want to pay attention to. So the first thing that I want to point out here is the italicized N, M, and SD. Basically, what you want to do is use italics for statistical symbols, including the sample size, the mean, standard deviation, and also test statistics, such as T statistics and F statistics. You don't want to use or use italics for statistics or Greek letters. So here, for example, I'm not doing that because I have Greek letters. Another thing that you might want to do is you might want to quote text from your experimental procedures or like. And basically, if you use less than 40 words in your quoted text, you can use it just like this in an in-text way. If you have more than 40 words, and I'm going to scroll down for this, you will actually want to put this into a separate section here and indent it entirely. And here you will not have the quotations around the text, you will just place it indented to the side, whereas if you use less than 40 words, then you will have it quoted and put into the text. A thing that you might get wrong, and I think it's a very small detail, but it's where to place the period. Is it before or after the quotes? And it's actually before the quotes. In the same way, you'll want to place question marks before the quotes, and you'll want to place commas and other things in front of the quotes. Okay, so the next rule that I have here is rounding. So generally you'll want to round your numbers to 2 decimal points. At times you can also do 3 decimal points, but I think it's a good rule to just do the 2 decimal point rule. If you use percentages, you can also use 1 decimal point. As far as I know, I would double check that though. The other thing that you want to do is you want to actually use commas if a number is longer to separate the thousands, etc. So here I placed a comma. Obviously, if the number goes on, then you want to put a dot here. So that's different between the European style. For example, in Germany, we actually do it differently with commas and dots. And obviously, this is the American style. And so you want to use commas to separate the numbers and then dots to actually say that the number is ended in its decimals. Another rule that you want to follow is that you actually put the test statistics into the actual text using commas here separating it. So sometimes I'll see that people actually put these test statistics in brackets entirely, but that's not what you want to do. The only thing that goes into brackets is here the degrees of freedom and also the sample size, but you don't want to put the whole statistic into brackets. What you do want to put into brackets though is means and standard deviations, or things like participant numbers. Let's see if I have the means here. So the means and standard deviations, they will go into brackets behind a reference condition, but then the test itself will actually go into the main text using commas. You'll also want to put the figure reference into the text using a comma. All right. One thing that you might find confusing as well is when to use a 0 in front of the numbers and when to not. So for example, here it's p smaller than .001, but then here it's 0.26. So the rule here is that you should, when the number can exceed 1, put a 0 in front of the dot. But then if the number can not exceed 1, then you do not put a dot in front of it. Do not put the 0 in front of it. So for example, a correlation coefficient would not be able to exceed 1, and so that's why you would place a 0 in front. You would not place a 0 in front of it, whereas effect sizes can usually exceed 1, and so that's why you would put the 0 in front of it. Another rule to follow is also whether you provide exact p-values or you do not provide exact p-values. So when you have a p of smaller of 0.001, you'll want to have the rounded p-value as I put here. But if you have a p-value that is larger than this value, then you would want to actually give the exact values. And I just noticed here that this is actually incorrect because this is supposed to be the exact value because it's bigger than the smaller than 0.001. So I have to correct that actually. Okay. Let's see. The other thing that you want to do is numbering of studies. You can number them in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll sometimes put like a B or an A after the studies as well. So that's an option as well. All right. So another thing that you might want to do is you might want to cite or mention a scale. You might want to say 7-point scale or 5-point scale, and you actually write out, you do not write out the 7, you say 7-point scale with using a number here. And then the scale values themselves will be, again, using italics here. And so basically whenever you're quoting scale values here, you don't use the quotes, which I think is sometimes a bit confusing, but you put it in brackets and you use italics. All right. Another thing that you need to know is that when you use numbers between 0 and 9, you actually want to write out the number. So you don't write a 7 in a numeral form, but you actually write it out. In addition, any number that begins a sentence, a heading, or a title should also be written out. So even if this was an 11, I would want to write this out because it starts the sentence, whereas here, if it's in the middle of a sentence, I would want to only write out the numbers between 0 and 9, although there are some exceptions, and so you would want to double check that with the guide that I referenced in the beginning on the website, where you can also download different guides. If you have, if you want to reference exact sums of money, such as $5 or $10, you again use numerals, so that's another rule. And you use that even if the number is between 0 and 9. All right, so I think those are most of the rules for the in-text citation. So then for the in-text rules, now I'm going to go over some of the other rules for references, appendices, and tables and figures. So you'll want to start the end of the document with your references. There's APA style that you can follow, and I would recommend that you use a citation tool such as Mendeley or Zotero, and the tool would automatically insert your citation using the format, the APA format. So for example here, I actually can just insert a citation using Mendeley. I haven't logged on yet, but if I was logged on, I could just insert it based on me searching for the reference. So it's very easy, and I would recommend that you do that. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about the rules for figures. So you should label the figures with numerals in order of their appearance in the text. You have two options. You can either place the figures at the end of the document, or you can actually place it in the middle into the document at the bottom of each page. But I would recommend that you just put it at the end because I think it's easier this way. Okay, so one thing to consider is that you will want to use tick marks for the axes. So here I have tick marks, and I also have tick marks here. You will also want to use the capitalization heading format in the description of the axes, both here and here, and even I think down here. Typically, you don't have the exact values as labels on top of the bars, although sometimes I've seen that people do enter them, so I would double check with whatever your journal is whether you should have the exact numbers on top of the bars. Obviously, there's more than just bar graphs. There's also line graphs and other types of graphs, and you want to check each of the rules for these graphs. Okay, I had one other rule that I wanted to show you that I didn't have in the main text up there. So if you have a list of things that you're quoting, another thing that you want to do is you want to put the commas before the quotes. And here again, you have the period before the quotes. So when it comes to appendices, so the figures you label in numerals, but actually the appendices you label them as appendix A, B, C, and D. And if you refer to figures of an appendix, you actually want to label that figure a figure A or B. Obviously, this is appendix A now, so that would be figure A, and I would also call that study A. Okay, so finally, I want to show you how to format a table in APA style. And so the interesting thing about APA style is that there are no horizontal lines. There's only vertical lines. And that's how you kind of do it here. You just have the vertical lines, and if you have any subcategories, you want to also put the vertical line here. And so here, the subcategories only apply to this section, but not to the remaining sections. These headings here have to go to the top and not somewhere in the middle, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And then a final rule for tables is that the p-values actually will end up being exact, also unless the p is smaller than 0.001. And if a value is non-significant, here you'll want to write ns instead of the p-value itself. Okay, so that was a guide to using APA style. I just want to say that there's surely many, many other rules, and there's probably also some errors in this main document, so please don't take this completely without skepticism, and make sure that you're following the guidelines by doing your own homework and making sure that, you know, things haven't changed over time, because APA also updates the guide, their guidelines on a regular basis, and so when you watch this video, it might not be the most up-to-date, so just make sure to update yourself as well.